Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Be sure to check out Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks. TCG Player for cards at great prices while supporting local game stores. And Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. When we got together for our annual Patreon meetup, we set up a camera and recorded games. Everyone had a great time at the get-together, and now you get to see how one of those games played out tonight. Our Patreon Discord webcam league is back. We are currently running our league through the month of October. The top 4 all win a Necropotence, and the grand prize for the winner of the league is a Mana Crypt. If you want to play in the league, sign up to our Patreon in the description below. All tiers qualify to play in the league, so sign up today and start playing. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ben piloting Chulane, Teller of Tales. This deck seeks to slow down the game with stacks, then take advantage of the commander to break parity and win the game. Ben's opening hand contains a Finale of Devastation, Collector Oof, Ancient Tomb, Mana Confluence, Worldly Tutor, Mana Drain, and a Marsh Flats. Next, we have Jordan piloting Hallar, the Fire Fletcher. This deck seeks to leverage Hallar's ability in conjunction with kicked spells in order to burn out each opponent. Jordan's opening hand contains a Mountain, Command Tower, Priest of Titania, Ancient Tomb, Tybalt's Trickery, Bonder's Enclave, and his London Mulligan is a Comet Storm. After that, we have Greg piloting the partner pair of Thrasios, Triton Hero, and Vial, Smasher the Fierce. This deck, called Curious Control, trades speed for control and advantage, seeking to control the board before closing out the game with a combo. Greg's opening hand contains Red Elemental Blast, Seedborn Muse, Arcane Signet, Deathrite Shaman, Windswept Heath, Undergrowth Stadium, and an Assassin's Trophy. Finally, we have Zach piloting Daretti, Scrap Savant. This deck uses a number of different layered pieces for strong synergy, stacks, and combo. Zach's opening hand contains a Mountain, Dockside Extortionist, Sphere of Resistance, Mirror Retriever, Mishra's Workshop, Grim Monolith, and a Rolling Earthquake. Without further ado, let's begin this potent precarious Playing with Power Patreon parable. Ben pronounced Chulane correctly, which I will refuse to do until my dying day, and gets to start us off. Ben draws a card for turn and plays a Mana Confluence. He passes. Jordan draws a card for turn and plays a Command Tower. He also passes. Greg draws and plays an Undergrowth Stadium. He casts a Deathrite Shaman. He ends his turn. Zach draws and plays a Mishra's Workshop. He casts a Grim Monolith. He casts a Chalice of the Void where X equals 1. In response, Ben taps his Mana Confluence to cast Worldly Tutor. He fetches up a Drannith Magistrate onto the top of his library. Then Chalice resolves. Next, Zach casts Sphere of Resistance. The table groans, realizes they are in for the long haul, strap in, and Zach gives the turn to Ben. Ben draws and plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb and his Mana Confluence to cast Drannith Magistrate. Ben passes. Jordan draws and also plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Priest of Titania. Jordan ships the turn to Greg. Greg draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. He passes. Zach draws and plays a Mountain. He casts a Mirror Retriever. Zach ends his turn. Ben draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. He taps his Ancient Tomb and his Mana Confluence to help cast Rhystic Study. Ben ships the turn to Jordan. Jordan draws and plays a Mountain. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Magus of the Moon. Rhystic triggers and Ben draws. In response, Greg cracks his Wooded Foothills, pays a life, and fetches up a Tropical Island onto the battlefield. He then floats green and black. Magus of the Moon resolves, and Jordan attempts to move phases. In response, Greg taps his Deathrite Shaman, exiling Ben's Marsh Flats, and casts Assassin's Trophy, targeting Magus of the Moon. Magus is destroyed, and Jordan fetches up a forest onto the battlefield. With nothing else, Jordan passes. Greg draws, holds open mana, and passes the turn. Zach draws and plays a Gemstone Caverns for turn. He passes. Ben draws and starts off his turn by tapping his Ancient Tomb and his Mana Confluence to help cast Bloom Tender. Ben ends his turn. Jordan draws and plays a Crag Crown Pathway. He passes. At the end of Jordan's turn, Greg casts Red Elemental Blast, targeting Rhystic Study, paying for Rhystic Study. This is when Zach reminds him that Chalice of the Void is on the battlefield. Red Elemental Blast is countered, and Greg weeps softly to himself. The turn then moves to Greg. During Greg's upkeep, he wipes the tears from his face. He draws, does nothing else, and passes. Zach draws and plays a Mountain. He passes. Ben draws and starts off his turn by tapping his Ancient Tomb to help cast his commander, Chulane, Teller of Tales. In response, Jordan casts Tybalt's Trickery, paying for Rhystic. Chulane is countered, Ben mills 3, then reveals until he hits Dispersal Shield, choosing not to cast it. Plans thwarted, Ben passes. Jordan draws and plays a Bonder's Enclave. He casts Seeds of Innocence, paying their Rhystic tax. All artifacts are destroyed, which is a huge blow to Zach. Zach gains 6 and Mirror Retriever triggers. Zach returns Grim Monolith to his hand. All through, Jordan passes. At the end of Jordan's turn, Greg taps his Death Right for a red, exiling Scalding Tarn from Ben's graveyard. He casts Pyroblast, targeting Rhystic Study. Study triggers, and Greg pays for it. In response, Ben casts Flusterstorm, with all copies targeting Pyroblast. Pyroblast is countered, and Greg moves to his turn. Greg draws and casts an Arcane Signet. Rhystic triggers, and Ben draws. Greg passes the turn. Zach draws and plays a Mountain. He casts a Grim Monolith. Rhystic triggers, and Zach pays. Zach follows up with a Goblin Engineer, paying the Rhystic tax. It resolves, and Zach fetches up a Cursed Mirror into his graveyard. Finished up, Zach passes. Ben draws and plays a Savannah for turn. He casts a Destiny Spinner. He casts a Collector Oof. Zach sighs, Oof resolves, and Ben passes to Jordan. Jordan draws and starts off his turn by casting Season of Growth, paying the Rhystic tax. He casts Burst of Strength, targeting Priest of Titania, paying the Rhystic tax as well. Season of Growth triggers, and Jordan draws. Priest of Titania gets a +1/+1 counter, and Jordan untaps it. Jordan follows up with a Blood Moon. Rhystic triggers, and Jordan pays. In response, Greg casts Force of Will, exiling a blue card and paying 1 life, targeting Blood Moon, paying the Rhystic tax. In response, Jordan taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Deflecting Swat, targeting Force of Will, paying the Rhystic tax as well. In response, Ben taps his Mana Confluence to cast Mana Drain, targeting Blood Moon. Mana Drain counters Blood Moon, Deflecting Swat redirects Force of Will to Deflecting Swat itself, and Force of Will fizzles. All through, Jordan passes. Greg draws, holds open mana, and passes the turn. Zach draws and starts off his turn by casting Dockside Extortionist, paying the Rhystic tax. It enters, and Zach creates 4 treasures. He activates Goblin Engineer, sacrificing Grim Monolith, returning Cursed Mirror to the battlefield. Cursed Mirror enters as a copy of Dockside Extortionist. It enters, and Zach creates 4 more treasures. Finished up, Zach passes. Ben draws, and in his first main phase, he has 3 colorless from his Mana Drain. He recasts his commander, Chulane, Teller of Tales. He casts a Mystic Remora. Sitting in a really good spot, Ben passes. Jordan draws and starts off by casting Kenrith's Transformation, targeting Drannith Magistrate. Mystic and Rhystic trigger, Jordan pays for Rhystic, and Ben draws from the Mystic. Transformation resolves, Drannith gets elked, and Jordan draws a card. Next, Jordan casts his commander, Hallar the Fire Fletcher, paying for Rhystic. Jordan passes the turn. Greg draws and starts off his turn by casting Sylvan Library. Mystic and Rhystic trigger, and Ben draws 2 cards. Greg ends his turn. Zach draws and casts Rolling Earthquake, where X equals 3. Rhystic and Mystic trigger, and Ben draws 2. In response, Ben taps his Mana Confluence to cast Mistcast, countering Rolling Earthquake. With nothing else, Zach passes. During his upkeep, Ben lets his Mystic Remora die. He draws and plays a Command Tower. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Finale of Devastation, where X equals 3. He fetches up a Ranger Captain of Eos onto the battlefield. Ranger Captain enters, and he fetches up a Shrieking Drake into his hand. He sacrifices his Ranger Captain, silencing his opponents. He casts Overburden. He follows up with a Shrieking Drake. Chulane triggers, Ben draws, then puts an island onto the battlefield. Shrieking Drake enters, and an Overburden trigger. Ben floats a mana and then returns a land and Shrieking Drake to his hand. He presents a loop of using his floating mana to recast Drake, drawing a card, playing the land, bouncing the land, and bouncing the Drake. He does this loop over and over to draw through his deck. He casts a Cloudstone Curio. He recasts Drake and uses Chulane to put in a Gaia's Cradle that he drew. He taps Gaia's Cradle to cast Arbor Elf, bouncing Gaia's Cradle to his hand through Overburden. He casts Elvish Mystic. Curio triggers, he bounces Arbor Elf, and then puts Gaia's Cradle onto the battlefield through Chulane. He can now repeat this loop to generate large amounts of mana. Using this large amount of mana, he casts all of the creatures in his deck. He then activates Destiny Spinner with his large amounts of mana, animating his lands and making them very large and have haste and trample, and attacks each opponent for the win. Ladies and gentlemen, what an interesting game. There was a lot of back and forth from all the decks trying to control one another. Each one was trying to lay out a different control strategy, and the others were trying to interrupt each other. This was a very unique pod with some interesting decisions. Congrats to Ben on his win. He was able to put out a number of card advantage engines and keep the control going until he could close out the game. The most valuable card in tonight's game goes to Rhystic Study. It was taxing each opponent on top of the other stacks on the board and giving Ben the card advantage he needed to win. It's no question how powerful this card is, and there really isn't much more to be said that hasn't been said a million times before. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Alright everyone, time for Patreon shoutouts. I'd like to give a shout out to Gabriel Adams, Thomas Thurber, Carrie, Noah Criswell, Mario Acevedo, Nod Noodle, Nicholas Tatum, Anton Oberg, Tom Spackman, Ryan Wright, Otto Von Trapp, Ivan Frapprell, Connor Holtz, Nathan Smith, Willow Lysander, Pyro, Dark, Mr. Doc Profolimic Swaggy Pants III, Philip Hickey, Jacob Cromer, Brad Tobin, Matt Wingrove, Delph Driz, Chad Hendricks, Dante, Christian L. Sutphen, Ryan Brower, Rune, Rakeko, Michael Hallett, Paul M. Toll, Quick Draw, Zods, James Cody Halley, Spencer Ryborn, Spilrahu, CZ, Taylor Coran, Darius Mitchell, King O'Sharks, Nick, Liam, Caleb Pretty, Tauntaun 101, Jacob Simpson, and Thomas Bowers. Thank you all very much.